So it was a great lunch, as usual here. And we're going to come back together for a piece called Benchmark Levers for Instructional Leadership. And if you're using your participants guide, it's 9.4 in the participants guide. So do you remember back in elementary school where they talked about the simple machines, and one of the simple machines was a lever?
I always hated that chapter.
Always hated that chapter? Do you remember what the other ones were? I know one was a fulcrum,
Lever.
a pulley,
A lever.
pulley, lever, fulcrum. I think they were the three, right? See, you couldn't have hated it that much because everybody remembered it. So who can tell me what a lever is?
Something that pulls.
Or maybe draw it for me.
A lever is an inclined plane?
Yes, look at the back.
Oh, got it. Is that correct?
What's a lever? Can someone draw one for me?
A lever.
Yeah.
I didn't teach you.
So if I were going to lift a rock, and I had to lift a heavy rock, if I went to pick it up like this, it would be nearly impossible. But if I push something underneath it to help me lift it, I would be able to lift something much heavier and larger than what I would be able to do without the lever. Okay? So a lever is something that helps us. It's not necessarily a part of our system because we're all thinking in terms of systems, but it's something in it's a resource it's a human resource, sometimes financial resources that we can use to help us to do our job, to make us more effective in our job. So we use levers in diplomacy. Aren't we seeing it right now? Where we talk about.
Are we really?
Are we? Well, potentially. Potentially we use levers where we can say, if in order to avoid a war, we are going to look at the potential of sanctions, right? So we're going to say it's going to, if you do not do the kinds of things that we need for you to do, we're going to impose some of these sanctions it's going to help us systemically to avoid things that are bad. In business, we see buyouts all the time, right? We see Amazon just bought out Whole Foods, right? And all of these mergers and all of these buyouts, and of course the thing we have to be cautious of in business is that we don't have organizations that are so large that it's a monopoly and it takes over everything. In the military, there is much talk of strategy. There's much talk of the center of gravity. What are the things that we need to pay attention to that are going to give us the biggest bang for our buck in terms of strategy? And another thing we're talking about now is tax incentives in government. Looking at a new tax plan, who's going to benefit, who's not going to benefit, having that studied so that we can make informed decisions. But we don't often talk about levers in education. Yet, I'm going to ask you to do just that. I'm going to ask you to think outside the box. This is going to be real brainstorming and creative thinking. But before we do, I'm going to reassign you your tables to different teams. So we're going to divide into 3 teams of 4. So if you start the count.
1,
2,
3,
1. No,
4.
1.
She's 1.
Oh, 1. No, 3 teams. I want 3 teams.
So 3, I did it right.
You did it right.
See? Sorry. What? I know when to apologize. You're 1 and I'm 2.
Okay.
I'm 3.
2, 3.
1.
2, 3.
Okay, so let's have the 1s at this table, the 2s at this table, and the 3s over here. Okay, give me a lever. Money. Financial resources is always one of the biggest things to come up. So I want you to hold that thought when you're working with your group, but I want you to think creatively about not only ways that you can get money that you don't now have, but things that you can do to replace financial resources to lever success, okay? This table, what's your lever?
I said coaches.
Extra support.
Okay, extra support, and in terms of coaches,
Right.
instructional coaches. And how about this table?
You mentioned like bodies, human capacity, like more.
Okay, so those are 2 big buckets that you gave me, financial resources and HR, human resources. I want you to think in your system. Your school is a system, and that's what we're thinking of. What kinds of things, and Jorge, you told me a story over here in the last piece that was a story that you definitely used as a lever in your system. What kinds of things can you do, and I'll be coming around to the tables, that might be thinking outside the box, might be looking at things a little bit differently to give you the impact to do some of the things that we're talking about in terms of our teams and our teachers? The one about your schedule, where you talked about how you looked creatively at your schedule.
Teachers took the big move of going from
to create that. The dance teacher could never have enough for 5 periods of dance. So she teaches a class of opposite.
We did that 2 years ago too. You just
Yeah.
take a look at the teacher certifications
Right.
and you'd be surprised what you find
What
in
you
the
find out in the
certificate.
certificate.
And that's how I've been able to add technology classes and stuff like that. Is that
Yeah.
Well, for me, because so many of my kids don't go to electives,
Right.
it bothers me. I had to really try to, if they could, like if they were already taking intensive reading, I didn't give them intensive
Right.
reading.
I don't offer intensive
So that
for
just,
that reason.
yeah.
Oh, you don't offer it at all?
I offer like one class.
I only have
No,
one
I know.
class this
Yeah,
year.
but I'm, oh,
They-
wow.
But it's like
I
hard.
do have interventions.
Okay, oh, really?
Because it's not the kids who don't get elected.
Correct. So I have robotics as our
Okay.
elective, and I've been able to do that with the kids, like just not give them another intensive class. So it could
Okay.
be advanced.
So when I was under ETO, one of the suggestions was double
Like double code class, like a
dose,
research.
right, double dose the kids. So if the kid is weak in math, you double dose them with interventions for mathematics or for reading the class and for science. So I was like, I cannot give these kids.
Oh, that's all they do
Kids
then.
hate it. They
Yeah.
have to come to school.
Right.
So what I did is that I took the teachers, the science teachers. I have one who teaches robotics. My parents are involved in kids, right? So I do one is a second course.
Oh, I do
And
that too.
they
I have
do
a
the
second
bridge
course. Yes, they do the bridge
and
building and
they
the
do
bottle rockets.
and everything.
And a period in class.
In the class.
Yep, we do
So
that too.
everything is done in the class.
Yep.
So it makes it fun.
Yes.
It does double dose them in science because
Correct.
we do tell them that whatever skills you teach, you need to make sure that your classroom is privileged with things that are related to science.
Right.
So he teaches 2 science classes and 4 robotics classes.
Oh.
And it gives the kids a break.
Yes.
And they're able to participate in the challenges because my parents don't have the money to buy the material.
Yeah.
So they do all the projects in the class.
Right, in class.
In the class.
Yep,
Yeah.
Yep.
That's what I do.
Yeah.
My other things are based on that.
yep.
You on block schedule or traditional?
This year, normally I was in traditional forever. This is the first time the teachers voted for block. So
And do they like it?
They do so far. They have difficulty with so much.
It's tough.
schedules,
If you're
like
doing bell-to-bell
differentiating
instruction,
issues.
it's hard because ours is 2-hour blocks, so that gotta maintain those kids.
Right.
Yeah, they have a hard time. But
Yeah,
it's
it is.
traditional Fridays. So
Mine
they
is
get a break.
accustomed to it. They do block.
We do block and
2
we have
hours.
traditional Wednesdays because of the early dismissal, since I'm at K8.
That's nice.
So since they get out at 1:50, then they do 15-minute periods on Wednesday. So it's even. Monday, Thursdays are even. Tuesday, Fridays are odd. I mean, Monday, Thursdays are odd. Tuesday and Fridays. And then I cut down on home movement. the first period is their homeroom.
They
Mine
got
too.
rid of homeroom too.
Yeah, mine too.
That was such
Yeah.
a waste of time. It was an
Yeah.
extra belt change.
Right, an extra bell change, that's what I
And
wanted to
more
avoid.
problems
And then
in
the
the
teachers
hallways.
didn't know their homeroom kids, cause those weren't the ones they taught, so, first period.
Yeah, that's what I did
But
too.
that's critical.
First period is your
Homeroom.
homeroom. But when we start with 2, like second period,
That there
2,
is a
4,
change,
6,
right.
there's a change.
They
Homeroom
changed
made
that.
it easy for
Like-
testing,
Yes,
Right.
but
correct.
for
But we
this,
test through the period, so it didn't even matter, like it was,
Right,
like the
for the
purpose
subject
of it
area.
didn't help, right? So that was it, what else
The
did we do?
scheduling is a monster in middle school.
scheduling?
I can't stand
the
it.
With
K-8.
limited, with
Yeah.
a small K-8 is very difficult.
What's your numbers?
525, 530
Oh,
in
really?
middle
Yours-
school.
I thought your school was larger than that.
What, 1,400 in total?
Oh, yeah.
But
Okay,
the middle
so-
school is 525, 530
Okay, that's not
kids.
too bad.
So your teachers
pretty big.
have to get,
Yeah.
you have to get creative with their certificates.
They're all subject area certified as far as content. The only thing is for the electives. That's where I get creative on the teaching of the electives. Because I don't like elementary and teaching middle school.
I did that for ESOL too.
I think
My
so.
level 3s and 4 ESOL students, I made every single one of my language arts. How could you be at West Miami and
Not be ESOL certified.
I told you
Yeah,
that story.
no, but
Not
I mean,
one-
that's
not one
like Woodson
teacher
Park.
wanted
But there's
Marina
people
ESOL
that don't
certified.
get
What's
the
wrong with you?
certificate.
So I said, listen, I understand, however, this is what we need, and this is the need of the kids. So everybody got an ESOL waiver, my level 3s and 4s, and the regular.
Oh, yeah.
So we did that. We did all the electives with critical thinking, so if anybody can teach it.
Right.
What else did we do? Oh, I have part-time music and part-time art. 5 hours a week, because I couldn't afford either one full-time or one. So I have part-time music and part-time art. Each of them teaches 25 hours a week.
Oh, okay, my elementary art teacher teaches 2 periods of middle school art.
But you gave me a really good idea because if I had that one Wednesday, because my art and music teacher in elementary
Are free on Wednesdays.
are free on Wednesdays, and so we've been giving them the kids who want to do art and music in the middle school. They've been going to those classes, but I could actually schedule it in. I had done like a Wednesday where it's just all
Straight.
traditional. So I think I'm gonna do that next week. I'll put it out there so
Right.
that way we can have it. And they can actually have
People like
a
the
set.
break.
We even tried, because the reason it started was because the art teacher only taught first period, middle school. So we had to see
Right.
first period every day. So that's why we went to straight on Wednesdays. But now that she taught 2 periods, it didn't matter if it was an odd or an even day on Wednesday. She could
Right.
choose to have it. And the teacher said no, that they wanted to stay with the 6 periods on Wednesdays.
Right, because if you do Wednesday, and if you do like how we're doing it in your block, you may have Wednesday 1 through 5
Right,
one
right,
day,
right,
and then
right.
6 to
2
4
for
6.
6, right.
And you can't run a schedule on that
can't.
for the people in elementary because
Right.
they can't do that.
Right.
You know, so that works.
K-8 is a whole different,
But then the thing
Monster.
is that we don't get funded for those activities. So it's like where you would use a traditional middle school and you would say, well, okay, I'll get funded for these kind of electives. You don't. So you have to use everybody that's within your building to be able to have these kind of offers for the kids. Otherwise, why do they want to stay?
Sure. The other thing I did was 5th grade. I have 2 teachers who were SPED certified, dual certified. So instead of having inclusion classes, they are departmentalized. So one teaches reading language, the other teaches math science. They keep their class at 22, and they serve as both the SPED and the regular teacher in the
I
class.
did that in the middle school.
Okay, let's come back together. I am hearing some really creative uses of levers in your schools. Remember, your levers might come from the standards, the state standards. Your levers might come from your state. They might come from the federal government. They might come from your teachers. They could come from any source at all, but it's a new way of looking at something as a resource. And I think I want to share this as a whole group because I hear so many things that I think would really benefit other people in the group. So let's just bounce off each other. Give me a lever. Anyone? Okay, tell me more about that.
So in terms of my school in particular with scheduling, we went from a 6-period day to an 8-period day. And what that allowed us to do was to keep it short. We were able to infuse common planning. So now the teachers have a dedicated time in which they can come together, as opposed to when we were a 6-period day where they were meeting real early in the morning, 20 minutes before the bell rung. And as I've been saying, all of us as former teachers, as Kenny always looks at it as the lens of a teacher, we remember what it was when you're getting to school, you want to be inside your classroom, you want to have those last second preparations. So we were able to leverage scheduling and make that common planning engraved in our school.
So instead of thinking there is no common planning, there's no opportunity for common planning, it was going back to the drawing board, and that's a perfect definition of a lever, to what can I do in my system if I tweak things just a little bit. How about another one?
Business and community partnerships.
Tell me more about that, Deb.
I'll let Kenny, because it's at the school base.
And he likes to talk.
You get the tag number on that bus? Well, I have the opportunity this year to where a nonprofit organization came to me. They want to run an after-school program at my school, and it's a great program, Monday through Friday, all the way to 6 o'clock. As long as I can get 75 of my students to say that they want to participate in the program. But the hiccup we have now is that they have to send DCF and all the people out there just to come and view the classrooms and see that everything is up to code and up to standards. So I have parents sitting back waiting, saying, Mr. Williams, when is this wonderful program going to start? And I started my own tutoring already on my Tuesdays and Thursdays, so they got kind of confused of, is it going to start? Is this going to start? When is this going to take place? Can I snatch my kid out of the program that it's in now that's costing me $164 a month
Oh.
to place them over here? So I'm still waiting, you know, that right now that's my lever to see, to make sure everything is in place before I can offer the program fully.
So it sounds like next year when you start, you would start without your individual that your school was
Next
running?
year when I will start day one with this organization
Right.
and the tutoring going from Monday through Friday for these 75 students. And then I can use those Title I funds in other places. But until everything is, the I's are dotted and the T's are crossed, I'm using my Title I funds just to fund my tutoring Tuesdays and Thursdays for now, because that's what we used to do.
But listen to what he, and my ears are perking for signs of leadership. And Manafe said this morning, not only did that principal help her, but she knew as a leader that she needed to spread that word, okay? It would have been really easy for Kenny to say, no, that's all right, I have a tutoring program. Because, you know, it's just gonna make more work for me this year. Because I have to juggle 2 different tutoring programs now. But he was able to recognize as a leader that this was a resource that had longevity. And I heard at a couple tables, Title I. Is Title I not a federal lever? Okay. What else?
Teacher certification.
Explain.
Well, teacher certification or certification requirements, both, because you can kind of play with certification requirements. There are certain course codes that just require you to have a certificate. It doesn't require a specific certification. So, and there's no specific course description for the course. So if you want to make enrichment courses, let's say a drama or a dance, and you don't have a certified teacher, you have a willing teacher, just code it as research or critical thinking, still offer the drama, technology, drama, dance, a million things that you can offer, which entices the kids to be happy, the teacher's happy, everybody's happy.
It's hard to find those win-wins. You celebrate those win-wins, right? So, okay, teacher certification requirements. How can you look at those with the lens of, we are looking for 2 wins here. It's not just going to be that the teacher's going to have their certification requirement, but it's also going to be something that's going to support our efforts here in the school. What else?
PTSA organization, parental support organization.
Okay, tell us a little more about that, because I found that really interesting.
I'm at a school where I'm very proud to have 6 very active PTSAs.
How about that? Is that now, and some people might not think that's a good thing, right?
Yes, it is a double-edged sword.
It is a double-edged sword.
That's very, very careful.
Each one of the
No,
programs,
it
they're
is
boosters.
sure. But if you channel that energy in the right sponsor all sorts of things that you wanna bring to your school.
Like what?
With, they bring authors. My associations have to do with the course of study that the children are in. If they're in the German program, the German PTSA supports it. If they're in the French program, the French PTSA will. They pay for field trips, they bring in authors, they bring in performers, they plan events for the children, for like Oktoberfest or Three Kings Day. They do something for all of the holidays for their language group.
My mind, when she talked about that, my mind went back to Unit 4, the first grade teacher, who he had all of these first grade students talk about and have the different, she organized the different kinds of animals. And then the field trip at the end took them somewhere where they could actually see these things, 3D. So again, that's a tremendous resource, but you said something that's really critical to that. And again, it's so much about mindset. Kenny's mindset with we're going to do this both ways this year. Your mindset with, yes, it's a double-edged sword. Bosh, they have lots of energy, but it has to be channeled. So that's a good instructional leader. You're always looking at opportunities for levers, but you're defining it by what's going to help the school and help your students, right?
I think as educators though, that is one of our strengths, because educators have always done a lot with a little. And I mean, that's why we are where we are. I mean, we are good at leveraging things. We have been doing that since we entered the classroom, because there has never been a lot of money. Or at least I never recall there being a lot.
What other things did we talk about at our
We
table?
also mentioned retired teachers and volunteers. It allows us to save a lot of funds and, having support for our interventions for our kids.
So, retired teachers and volunteers. It used to be that when someone retired, they retired. Elfrida and everybody else on this side of the room can speak to the fact that that is no longer the case. And someone, I think Kenny said this morning, we are all teachers. That is not a hat I want to give up. We still want to do something to contribute to education and students. So how are we going to do that? And boy, if you have a cadre of retired teachers who are looking to volunteer, who are looking to do something to help young students, what an opportunity to use these people. But again, it's an energy that needs to be channeled and looked at in terms of the organizational structure and what we can do to best help our students. Others? Deb?
From a completely different perspective, legislatively, legislative advocacy, case in point, the 3 consortia in Florida recognized that the rural districts were not getting enough broadband or internet capability, fiber, dark fiber, to have one-on-one computers and testing. They just didn't have enough infrastructure to have the speed for computers to even work in their rural districts. And the legislature was handing out monies based on FTE. Miami-Dade has a very high FTE. They were getting a big chunk of the money. Glades County in my area was getting maybe $100,000. Nothing. They could not make anything happen. So the 3 consortia directors went to the legislature and talked to champions for that particular funding and said, look at our rural districts. This is how we compare to the bigger districts. We had all the data to support that and asked them to, let's give everybody some base funding. Miami-Dade's getting 500 or 250. Let Glades County get 250, and then you can give FTE up and above and beyond the base but we got that changed.
That's right.
And so we not only got it from 250, but now the base is 500,000. And at the school level, they may not recognize that, but at the district level, they get a lot of money for digital classroom projects that spread out throughout the district.
Deborah,
You took
that's
our
what you took our money.
Oh. Is that like,
No. You
Thank you for the
You got the
clarification.
same amount of money, we
Yeah.
just got our money.
oh, that sounds like the red states and the green states, right?
We didn't take anything from you, in fact, we got the ante for you.
Everybody got more money, right?
Everybody got
So that is true, you know, we never. really
Jordana.
think about that.
Yeah, you know.
Yeah.
George had mentioned that he has a culinary arts teacher who has a science background. So he's leveraged personnel, so he's able to incorporate science objectives within that class. And then I also, you know, sometimes at an elementary level, we have a music teacher or an art teacher or a world language teacher who is able to infuse core subject objectives within their subject area. So again, we're leveraging personnel.
So one of the things we talked about earlier this morning, Jorge and I, is that how do you instill that lifelong learning into people? And I think that's one of the ways you do it. You recognize the expertise in the people that you have, but you have to know them. They have to trust you, that you're not going to take advantage of that. And you deliver instruction in ways that he said when he talks about it in his instructional leadership team, they all talk about the things they're working on. So all of a sudden, the science teacher is able to connect with some sort of culinary project that's going to bring in science, math, all of those things that are going to be combined to create that level of interest for the students, that relevance, right? Levers? Any more we want to talk about? I'm trying to think of things that, grants. How about grants? Is that a possibility? Is that something that's still available to people?
What about technology?
Yeah, our teachers.
Oh, boy, that's a big one, isn't it?
Technology. I know that here in County, we have something called Power BI, and it's extremely user-friendly. I don't know if you have it over there, Deborah, Power BI.
Tell us about it.
Power BI, it's a platform in which it's just extremely user-friendly, where you can pull up data amongst your current kids. It's a one-stop deal where you get in your Power BI, and it's very individual data to the exact teacher, to the periods. It's an amazing tool, and I know everybody, all my fellow colleagues and friends here, we've adapted ourselves to understand the intricacies of Power BI, and it's a very powerful platform. But
Now,
it's
is that an app or is it something you have to purchase?
No, we don't have to purchase it. We just log on, and
It's a
and
It's a Microsoft
It's a
platform.
Microsoft
Wow.
product.
That has
That
been
we,
adjusted to,
I mean, you're supposed to pay for it. I think our
we
district.
do, we have
I
paid
think
for it, we
the
paid for a limited number of
district-
licenses.
Yeah.
Okay, okay.
We got
So-
it free at first, and then they started to, as a user trial, and then the district started it.
So think about, that came up even earlier, technology in terms of a lever, how we can use it so that we don't have to spend our leadership meetings with teams talking about stuff that's all managerial. We can do that by communicating in different ways. And boy, can't we do that also by communicating in different ways with parents. I know there was a district that actually did preschool communications with potential parents in terms of things that the students should know, things that they should be looking at with their students, things that were developmentally appropriate for them to have when they come to school.
Well, going back to what you said about grants, I know a lot of my teachers have done those mini grants where you get donors choose and or something like that. I believe it's donors choose. When they go in and they fill out the grant application, which is very, not tasking, but they just complete what they need for the classroom. And a lot of my teachers have gotten like furniture, technology, laptops, tablets, all kinds of stuff. And they usually like funded within like a month.
You can redesign things based on a grant sometimes. The only caveat is that you have to be cautious that you're not putting things into the grant that financially you're going to have to support after the grant is finished. But it's really easy to redesign things sometimes by using grants. Bless you.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other, I mean, how many people have reading specialists in their building? How do you use them?
Coaching cycles, plan with the teams, tutoring, many things.
Pseudo administrator.
PEs.
What's that?
She's a pseudo administrator also.
Okay. Okay. So I always felt that they were one of the most underutilized people in buildings, because when you talk to all of the teachers, it doesn't matter where you are. Most teachers, even elementary teachers, say they've had one reading course in their whole curriculum in their college years. So how do we get that changed through use of a different use of those kind of people? So let's then, whoops, yo. I'm quick. So here are the areas of the Nissel wheel. So here's what I'm going to ask you to do next. You have come up with a very comprehensive list of some of the levers, and you know how sometimes we said in the beginning units that, everything is out of our control. We're told what to do and we just have to do it. All of these things that you listed are things that are in your control. Now I'm going to ask you to look at your Nissel wheel, and I want you to, because the Nissel wheel is a list of levers. All of these things that we list are things that we can leverage to make our system more effective in our building. What I want you to do is I want you to get out your wheel, and I want you to page through by scanning those things and see what other levers are available that we might want to add to our list. And we have 15 minutes to do this. What you're doing is you're going through the levers in the wheel, all of those levers, to identify some things that we didn't talk about that you might be able to do. Do you need a wheel?
I've got it right here.
No, the wheel book that gives you, because you won't have all the information you need. Yeah.
I saw it.
Everybody have their wheel book? Okay, remember, you're coming up then to write any lever that you find that we haven't already talked about on the blank piece of paper.
Were we supposed to look at the Nissel wheel?
Yes, you're looking at the Nissel wheel. You're looking at the Nissel wheel, and what you're going to do is you're going to look at each one of these pieces of the wheel, and you're just going to skim it and scan it to see if there's any levers that come up that we didn't already talk about. Got it?
I was gonna just do the same thing.
Remember, these are coming from your wheel book. Yeah, they're going to be, these are additional pieces that come from the wheel book. I want you to scan the book and look for.
Scan the book. Formative assessments, that's a lever.
He needs that as a
Formative
leverage.
assessments for instruction, yeah.
So, we,
So
health
formative,
and
we'll
service
go up there now.
program. What?
Formative assessments.
community agencies, but we have it all.
Teacher craft knowledge.
Frameworks.
Let's change the page, shall we?
Frameworks. Help provide leverage.
That's true.
Use of your physical space. It's here.
Okay, moral leadership.
Katina doesn't like any of my gestures.
No, Dr. Pelletier.
That's what.
I just found it more interesting. More. I'm like,
leadership?
what is it?
Yeah, but how
Moral
is that no
leadership. It is, because you know, if
Now that
morally,
we do
ethically.
ethical
Right,
training for our
right,
staff.
exactly. If you're morally and ethically,
I
I
did
passed,
mine
I didn't miss, I
if
missed
you're
November,
morally
December,
and
I
ethically
think,
whole,
two.
you're more than willing to go above and beyond to do what
I
you're.
forgot November.
for the children.
Well, that's true.
All right, thank you very much.
Do we have to keep like a sign-in
Dr.
sheet
Pelletier
and
is
a lot
not
of
allowed to
this?
give us any
Yes.
more suggestions.
You do?
You should, especially if you have a problem with an employee.
It's a lot of pressure and
Did you do them? Did you see how boring they were?
I haven't done it
Like
yet.
I had one that was just.
November's your
arrested.
first one.
I missed November, I have
Well,
scheduled
you
for
better-
December 5th.
How can we
You,
send it
in
an
December, you
email?
have another one.
I'm doing both on December 5th.
Just do it on Monday.
You're not gonna have time. Have you seen how?
No, is
boring
it that
is?
long?
Just do it Monday.
I could do the following Monday.
Yeah,
The
just
following
get
Monday,
rid of
there's
it.
still time, right? Yeah, it's still
Yeah,
November.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, it's, well,
After
you can do
Thanksgiving.
whatever,
You're
just
fine.
catch up. But
But
it's,
no, can you just send an email?
No, it has to be live.
It has to be live through Beacon.
Oh, what do you mean through Beacon?
Yeah, they give you a link through
It's a
Beacon.
real course?
Yeah,
Yes.
It's a real
It's a little-
PowerPoint,
Have
and
one
then
for me?
there's 2 minutes.
We did formative assessments.
Okay, we got that one.
Oh, what was the next, the other one?
Actually, we did
Frameworks.
more. What's the other one that we,
Frameworks.
Got
you
that
did
one.
not write mine.
We did.
He didn't like mine either.
He didn't like my, I did physical
I
space,
put,
use
and,
of the physical
and
space.
I put moral
Ah, see Katina, she liked mine.
leadership. Physical space. Good one, Dr.
Yeah,
Pelletier.
it's boring.
What do you need? Katrina?
What was your moral what? What did you say?
Moral leadership.
Moral
What do
leadership.
you need? I'm stuck on- I'm still
Joan, I
stuck on
put
the
moral
number.
leadership.
Yeah,
I
well,
put
no,
it on
it's-
already.
Thank you.
It's
She
a
liked
15
mine
minute
too.
PowerPoint, but it's a video, it's an interactive video.
So we don't have to talk.
You don't have to talk.
Oh, I
But
just have
he's
to hit
doing the
play?
lesson, and then there's
I can't
three
send you-
scenarios
I
that they
can't
have to
send you
talk
the
for a
link.
minute. To come
Oh,
up with an answer, but
That's
it's already
it?
built in.
and that's it?
But it's boring.
But I can't send you the link so you can watch it here.
No, you need to,
No.
you didn't read the briefing from Dr. Jimmy
I
Burns.
will.
Saw the brief.
Okay.
I scanned the briefing.
Moral leadership and ethical, you must ensure that they watch that. Because God forbid something happened and they say you didn't show it.
And what was this first one?
Employee and student relationships.
What's the second one on?
Guess
Yeah, they need that. What's the second one on?
Corporal punishment, I wanna say.
Corporal punishment?
Oh,
We really
wow.
have to go through that?
I'm gonna do 2 together. I think your idea
Right?
is good.
Why can't I do them both on December 5th?
Yeah, 15 minutes.
Have you guys had that troubled or typical presentation? What is that?
Listen, the students, the gay, lesbian.
Oh, that's what
the
it
whole
is?
thing, yes.
That's
But
really
it's-
long, isn't it?
But it's really good to, it's either it's for the teachers, troubled or typical.
Right.
They're gonna give you scenarios, they're gonna tell you is it a troubled or is it typical
So
behaviors of
I'm gonna do
children.
that and the ethical on the same day.
But I didn't
Is
do that
bad?
training, they did it for me. I didn't
Yeah,
do
no, they're
trouble.
coming to do it. So they're coming to do that and then
I
I can
didn't
do the
figure out
ethical right
time.
after.
Oh, I'm not scheduled yet for that.
That's gonna go over my hour limit. I can't. That whole plan of having wonderful faculty meetings are out the window.
PDs that I have
Right.
scheduled with Dr.
Yes, exactly. And now I get this email. You haven't replied to us. We need to come in and do your troubled or typical presentation.
Oh, they gave you guys one, so you have to do it. You have to do it.
They're doing it. They're coming.
Oh, I didn't get that.
How about
Nobody,
master
you'll get it soon enough.
I like that.
Stay tuned.
Yes, I agree,
Yes.
Renee. Yes, say it. Joan.
What are you doing? What else? What's the other one?
master teachers?
Yes, you can leverage master teachers.
How about credit? Like praise and credit and.
Joan, Renee has master
Master
teachers.
teachers.
Oh.
We ignore Dr. Pelletier. I don't
Everything I say.
Data.
Please take
Dr.
care of me.
Pelletier, tell me how
Data.
you feel, honey. What
Data.
did you say? I'm sorry.
I feel very unloved and
Okay.
unwanted. I am no
You
longer.
had a very good point. What did you say? I'm
I am
sorry.
no longer participating
Data.
in this group.
Please don't feel that way. We value your input,
Data.
Dr. Pelletier.
Data.
No.
We really value your input, but Renee's very needy today.
Yes, I
So
am.
Please repeat what you said.
Incentives for high performance.
Incentives, I love it, for any type of performance. Very good, Dr. Pelletier. That is such a great topic. Incentives for any performance.
Just the fact that you showed up,
What grade
we're
did you
gonna give
teach?
you an incentive.
I was a high school crazy
You were a
kid
high school teacher? That's
Yes.
awesome.
I
You were
was, I
high
loved
school?
it, yes.
And that's how she treated her students.
I did.
Okay,
I made them know-
so
know
come
I
back
was
with
old.
me.
What'd you say?
So I tried to give everybody an opportunity to walk around a little bit and work off that lunch. You with me? So we had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 levers on this sheet. And by looking at the wheel, we came up with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 more. Take a look at those levers from the wheel. So tell me choose one that you feel really confident about. Data. What kinds of things are you doing with data that help you to feel really confident about it?
Looking at all the kids, where they are by subject, if they're higher, lower, how close they are to the next level, looking at their instructional levels in reading and math, and being able to pick resources to match their instructional levels to then give them intervention, remediation, tutoring, all of it.
Also looking at the data to look at what kids might have progressed and giving those teachers to make sure that that those teachers are giving them the enrichment tools that they need to keep them on the next level.
Who else feels confident with another piece of that they could talk about? I think we've done a lot in the last 10 years with data. The one thing I hear, though, and you answered, my next question for you was going to be, so you have that data, but what are you doing with it? But you answered that question before I could even ask it. You're looking at ways that you can level materials in the classroom, that you can give students things that they can read.
And targets. Like, we use the data to also know what students are where, because sometimes teachers think, oh, these students are really high or these students are really low, and then they look at their data for the last couple of years and they're shocked. And I'm like, how do you not know that that child was a 3 last year and you're thinking he's low or high, whatever. So it also fine tunes a lot of the way that they now have to teach and structure certain lessons to make sure that, as Kenny says, those children maintain or increase, or the ones that are at the bottom go up. So we can almost pinpoint what kid needs to do what to get to that next level.
So we basically have 2 jobs with our students. The one is to raise all of the students. The other is to take the gap, the performance gap between some students and others that has been kind of accepted, to move those students in a way that they are able to perform at the same levels of our other students. That sounds an awful lot like formative assessment too, doesn't it?
It is.
Yeah, there's a connection to that. We are going to talk about in Unit 10 moral leadership, because the subject of conversation is going to be ethical leadership. And I tell you that it's not something that we haven't talked about a lot. It's not something we have talked about a lot in education. But I can promise you that this will be a unit that you're really going to enjoy, because it'll give us an opportunity to question, reflect upon where we have come from in terms of our background and how that speaks to our moral leadership. So I think that's something that we can definitely look forward to. How about the use of physical space? Tell me something that you might be doing or that you might consider to help your teachers.
But the way you coordinate the classrooms, who's in which classrooms, so you can, there's different views of that. You could them in elementary by grade level, you can put it by subject area. In the middle school or high school, you can put it, subject areas, you can put grade, depending what your vision is, what your purpose is, how you situate them. We had a bad persona. So someone had to move out of the big building where the middle school is because we were too big. So one person had to move out. So that's the person that got moved out. So now she's isolated with elementary people around her, so she can't. So there's a lot of peace and tranquility, and she actually has to teach. She doesn't have the distraction of her best friend next door or what the kids are
How
up
about
to,
that?
and so it's worked wonderful.
Novel idea, right?
Yes.
There was a young principal that once said to me, I tell teachers that struggle with working and doing what's right for students, I can either help you out or I can help you out. And so you helped her out. How about, boy, who said a vision? We forget about this a lot, don't we? Having a vision is definitely something that we could use as a lever. Because now we're saying, this is our vision, is what you're asking for, is what you're doing every day aligned to what we have decided is our vision. And if it's not, why are we still doing it? Are we measuring that? And if it's not taking us closer to our vision, why are we still doing it? Right? Anything else that you would like to talk about before we go forward? Okay. Hearing nothing from the audience, I will go forward. So the next piece we're going to look at is 9.5 in your participant handbook. So this time I'm going to ask you to get out the Nissel wheel again. And this time we are going to focus on the piece that talks about high performance organization and management. But before we do, I want you to look at the picture of the wheel. This is a wheel that's created by Mark Tucker, who is the director of NCEE. And look at the structure of the wheel. Do you think that do you not have a wheel?
No, I have it.
Okay. Look at the target, the middle of the wheel, the pieces that are there. He has created with that target, high quality aligned instructional systems, which we did have, high quality teachers and teaching, high performance organization and management. That is they are the critical subsystems of what we do. The other things that go out from the wheel are things that are important, but if we have those subsystems in order, that makes all the difference. So let's now turn to high performance organization and management. And that would be on page 10. Right? Okay. I want you to read through that section, high performance organization and management. So you're reading pages 10, 11, and 12. And I want you to focus in your reading and annotate based on these two things, the amount and depth of collaboration suggested by the elements and the organizational and scheduling implications related to the elements. So you're reading those 3 pages. So tell me your reaction to reading this. What are some reactions?
There's some very strong terms, such as extensive and continuous, expected to, obligated to. Really, the system, they do, and that's permanent, carefully chosen, progressively more demanding. So those are very strong terms there, and very expensive terms.
Financially expensive?
Well, financially, for example, one, absolutely financially. For example, every student is assigned a teacher to monitor them from the beginning to the end, who's gonna advocate for them, who's gonna provide them and assist them with practices so they master, because they're expected to master this curriculum before. That's a lot. It's a lot. However, what we can take from the wheel is a lot of what we can do with what we already have, and use our in-house levers to ensure that we can meet these expectations for the kids.
So I think that's a great point, because I think sometimes we look at these things and we say, I'm just exhausted reading this. This is not something that I can even tackle, so I'm going to leave it. Whereas what you're saying is, this is expensive in terms of many different kinds of resources. But how can I look at this through the lens of my school and see what steps I can take to make this happen? Does anybody do mentoring of students? Do you do it?
We do.
So how do you do it?
Training program. So what we do is we take our needier kids, not only just the lowest 25% for academics, but some of the needy kids that are needier, and we ask teachers who wants to volunteer to mentor this child. So we have a cute little activity binder of things that they can do with them on a monthly basis, and pulling out the kids and having lunch with them, or we'll have an ice cream social, and we ask them just to stick with whatever child they want to the end of the year, and it does make a difference, because they know that that's Dr. Pelletier's baby. Listen, you know what he did today? So that makes a difference, because when you only have 2 counselors in a middle school, it makes it rather difficult for them to be able to have that one-on-one time.
And I think that you recognize so many critical words, and one of them was ongoing, so that the advantage of having that mentorship of a student with the teacher, or maybe a few students with the teacher, is that it's ongoing. That person is, like you described it, your baby. That is a person that you're going to watch over, that you are going to look toward. One of the things I hear a lot from teachers is they're not coming in with the same kind of background that they used to come in with. They're not getting the support at home that we have as an expectation for students. So how can we look at ways that we can recreate that? Any other reactions?
With the mentoring, it isn't always academic. We always have a certain amount of students that get mentoring due to social interaction, emotional, social needs, especially in middle school. And if you take care of those, the academics will take care of themselves. But they can't do the learning when the social, emotional needs are not being met.
So there's different kinds of mentoring. Any other reaction to that? Heavy lift?